The mesmerizing force of Tetris goes virtual. It's 3D Tetris for Virtual Boy. Three-dimensional blocks and rotating planes make this Russian puzzler the ultimate 3D challenge where quick response and strategy rule.
Hi, I'm the Thesterninator. Welcome to the channel. And today we're talking about abilities. You have them, I have them, Pokemon have them, though theirs are arguably cooler. What I wouldn't give to have static or lightning rod, or these other abilities that just sound really cool that only Pokemon have. I mean, all I have are these hands that twist and mold to create Pokemon that are evil and dark, taking what makes them who they are and stopping it from them. Or something really cool like Swift Swim. And I wonder how often other Pokemon have that same type of thought. How much that they wish that they had the abilities that these other Pokemon have. Like how some have these unique abilities just for them. So I figure, why not even the playing field? Why not go to that board, swipe all the pieces off and say we're starting fresh, taking those unique abilities and throwing them onto Pokemon that have some semblance of reason as to why they should have them. So that's what we're doing today. Let's get started. Hi, I'm the Thesterninator, but my friends call me...
It's a bird! It's a plane! It's
And welcome to the channel. Don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, and let's hop right into the video. First up is Wishy-Washy. Introduced in Gen 7, it's not much to look at, but get it into a battle, and you'll be quick to find that sticks and stones may break its bones, but a Voltron-style mech made out of you and your closest friends ain't nothing to be trifled with either. Yes, so long as Wishy-Washy is above 25% HP, it can use its schooling ability and get a massive boost in base stat total, reaching just about 630. First encountering this thing as a trial captain in Alola was a nightmare. It was the first point of the game that I remember having to do over and over and over and over and over again. And to think it's all because of this little sardine. But why should Wishy-Washy have all the fun? I mean, having a pathetic looking fish thing almost seems like a pattern at this point, Pokemon. Feebas becomes Milotic, Wimpod becomes Golisopod in the same generation, and of course, Magikarp becomes Gyarados. But I got to thinking, what if other Pokemon got schooling instead of an evolution? And who better to test this theory on than our original terrible fish himself, Magikarp? Okay, terrible is a strong and accurate word to use for this guy, so let's beef him up. I always found it kind of weird and interesting that Magikarp becomes Gyarados. Little orange koi fish becomes big blue dragon. I know that it comes from that whole theory and myth that once the carp gets its way to the top of the waterfall, it would become ascending to a dragon, but it still feels weird. I mean, Gyarados doesn't fit a lot of stuff. It's not even a dragon. It's a water flying type. You look at that thing and you tell me that there's any semblance of flying to it. Regardless, I'm going to go ahead and get off my soapbox and say it makes a lot of sense that it gets a schooling form. It's a carp. Its whole thing is that it can't do anything by itself. So, giving it this ability of schooling, I think, makes some sense here. It also allows us to redesign Gyarados in a fun and interesting way. I was really surprised at how difficult it is to make it work as a bunch of fish. I have to give credit to the Pokemon artists for Wishy-Washy schooling form, because this was fun, but boy was it a challenge to make it feel like it was working right. I think that I came out with something that I'm pretty happy with and got to play around with the shadows and lighting a little bit, which I think gave it a ton of life, but I was kind of uncertain the entirety of this drawing. I felt like it was too lumpy, like there were too many things going on, but that's kind of the point of the schooling design, isn't it? That there is a lot going on, that it is kind of lumpy because it's a mass of animals all conjoining together to create one seemingly huge creature. I also got to play with the colors a lot because one of the interesting things is being that Gyarados is naturally a very different color than Magikarp. If I'm going to make this a bunch of Magikarp, then it has to be the same colors. So I got to play with the color schemes there a lot and realize that Magikarp is very limited in its color scheme. Orange, yellowish, and that's about it. A couple bits of white here and there, but ultimately this is where we ended up going. So I had to find some ways to kind of try and cheat the system, using gradients between the two different colors to make things work and I'm pretty happy with the way it turned out. I think adding those numerous eyes makes it feel busy, but again, that's kind of the point of this design. To feel busy, to feel loud, to scare off predators because it looks so menacing. So I feel like it worked, and the eyes I think definitely give it a little bit of extra oomph where it needs it. The eyes, of course, being those yellow spots that we see glowing all throughout Wishy-Washy's schooling form. Only thing is, those eyes are blue because Wishy-Washy's eyes are blue. These ones are that white, vacant stare of a creature that has nothing going on right behind those eyes. Not a thought in his head. So that was interesting. Those white spots became kind of a nightmare and a blessing to me as I went through this entire process, trying to find ways to make it work, and ultimately, I'm really happy with how this turned out. Again, the shadows and lighting, getting to use the lighting to dance differently on this texture than I normally have because it's meant to shine over multiple creatures rather than one, was fun. And I think it's a lot of fun experimentation with the process. So this is Schooling Magikarp. Notice that its name is not Gyarados. And of course, if we're going to have a Schooling Magikarp, then for the shiny, we have to go with that classic gold Magikarp. I love it. And the fact that it feels like it's referencing the red Gyarados, feeling just a bit more menacing, is mwah, chef's kiss. Hey, real quick, I want to remind you about the Multiversal Drift. That is an art challenge that I have going on where all you have to do is think of an alternate world where maybe Pokemon had to adapt to a different climate, or a trainer wasn't where they should be and therefore ruined an entire timeline. Post these to Instagram, X, Blue Sky, or my private Discord and tag them with hashtag SternMultiDrift. That way I can find them. At the end of February and March, I'll be doing videos where I showcase these worlds and the creations that you guys have done. I don't want to take up too much of your time, so you can check that out in the Discord or in my community post. Now, let's get back to the video. When dissecting these specific abilities, I of course had to look at the Pokemon that both everyone caught and no one caught, that being Zygarde. See, in Alola, you can find the Zygarde cells, throw them in the Zygarde cube, and out pops a Zygarde with value equal to the number of cells collected. So that means that Zygarde's perfect form, aka its 100% form, is technically 100 Pokemon together. At least I've been told. I've never been one to go looking for all of these little secrets to try and put a Pokemon together. I'm not the guy looking for Riddler trophies in Pokemon. But that means that we can move over Mousehold, Dugtrio, and Phalanx because Zygarde takes the cake for most Pokemon per Pokemon. Hooray! Yay! Or at least it might, if it wasn't for another spooky guy. Yeah, Sun and Moon introduced a lot of really fun and interesting new mechanics to abilities and forms. Palossand is who I want to talk about for a moment here.
But Stern, that's only one Pokemon.
That's where you're wrong, you big dummy. See, its Ultra Sun Dex entry goes as follows. Each of its grains of sand has its own will. Palossand eats small Pokemon and siphons away their vital essence while they're still alive. Now, the second part of that is absolutely horrifying, but the first part of that entry is what I want to look at. Each of its grains of sand has its own will. And if each grain of sand has its own will, its own wants, its own dreams, its own aspirations, well then that means that Palossand is the winner by far. That's a lot of bang for your buck. Millions of microscopic Pokemon crammed into one Pokeball like a spherical clown car. So then if we redistribute some titles here, that would make Sandygast a 10% form and Palossand a 50% form, but we'd be left without a 100% form. Well, we'll have to do some work on that ourselves, I think. On the outset, this one seemed pretty simple. Just throw sand over Zygarde's perfect form. But I found some other aspects that I really wanted to bring into the ideas here. Some shapes and some language that I wanted to play with to give this just a little bit more texture. And I don't know why I do this to myself. It made things 10 times more difficult. I decided that I really wanted to capture that castle shape that we have with Palossand across the arms, the hands, the head, everywhere. Make this look like a walking fortress. And yeah, I made things more difficult for myself. But ultimately, I think that it works out. I think that it's something that really plays up who this Pokemon is, what their design elements are, and kind of everything about them. Obviously, if you're going to have a castle-shaped Pokemon, then when it evolves, it should look like a fortress, like this impenetrable bastion. So I kind of didn't have a choice, and I'm glad that I didn't, because this looks so cool. I love it. I get to play with all these shapes in so many cool ways, really mimicking almost the idea of a crown being worn about the collar of a ruler rather than on the head. And yeah, using the buttresses of the castle, that's not the right word, but the things, the little, you know, the things that come up and down on the tops of castles. Those things. I get to use those to play with the hands in some really fun ways, extend them into the fingers while still feeling like this crumbling sand castle. I had to maintain that this is the perfect form, so having it be a ruined castle crossed my mind, but it's not something that I could necessarily follow through on because this has to be the ultimate life form. Not Sonic the Hedgehog, not Shadow. That's a different video. We're not talking about Shadow the Hedgehog. But I got to play with those ideas and ended up going away from them just because if I'm going to capture the perfect idea of this character, it being 100%, then ideally it wouldn't be falling apart. So I ended up doing that, and I'm happy with the way it turned out. If I had it my way and I wasn't following a prompt on this design, I may have made it look a little bit more ruined. I think it'd be really cool to give it a stony texture if we're gonna go all the way outside of what the prompt is. So yeah, I think that would be cool, and maybe it's something that I'll touch base on later. Stakataka is my favorite UB, so a stony outcropping type Pokemon would be really cool. But right now we're talking about sandcastles, which is a weird phrase to have said twice this week. But regardless, I'm really happy with the way it turned out, and being that this is sand and it's an interesting texture, rather than do my normal shading like I typically do, which is where I'll do a darker gradient and then a gradient with a blue wash over it, I ended up just following the exact color schemes used, because Palisand actually doesn't follow the same rules for shading that most Pokemon designs do. A really interesting thing to learn and look at. I always suggest that when you're looking at doing art, you kind of look at different reference material. It's not cheating. I know some people look at it that way. It's not. And this one, I definitely needed that reference material to give me a grip on where I wanted to go. So this is 100% form Palisand. I dig this so much, and I think it just becomes even cooler when we get that black sand shiny type look. It is such a cool comparison to the stark white shiny for Zygarde. So we've tackled quantity, but what about quality of the Pokemon? What makes them into something worth catching? What introduces a whole new way of understanding their ability? What takes them from zero to hero? Hey, what a coincidence, that's actually Palafin's unique ability. Yes, this blubbery little flipper takes on their hero form when avenging another Pokemon, but what if it didn't? What if instead of going from zero to hero, this Pokemon went from zilch to evil? Can we get someone to rewrite that? Picture this, a tragic story between two Pokemon in love, but like Clark Kent and Lois Lane, one keeps disappearing, leaving the other alone. They don't know that he's the hero off saving the world from dastardly fire types, and so when they discover their beloved's alter ego, they become something to rival that power, and because maybe this is really the only way that they can be together. And all of this while never even realizing that Palafin wore a heart on its chest to remember for whom he fights for. Sorry, that was kind of dark, but you have to forgive me, my babysitter was TV. I wanted to do something here that really played up that idea. I look at the chest marking of Palafin and see that big red heart, obviously meant to mimic a Superman type symbol, but I wanted to play up that heart angle. And who would be the damsel in distress turned villain for this Pokemon? Well, obviously it would be Luvdisc, to the point that Palafin wears the symbol of Luvdisc on its chest. But obviously turning to the villainous side, I wanted to make this feel also like a counterpart to Palafin. If you watched my recent video that we did 2 days ago, actually, you saw that we went over different counterpart Pokemon, and I feel like Palafin, given that it is the superhero-styled Pokemon, definitely deserve to have a villain to go up against. And I know we can say, well, Scovillain exists in the same region, but it just doesn't strike the same tenor for me. So I wanted to do something that really fit that same family. And I know we're going to look at this and say, well, that doesn't look very much like Love Disc. It looks about as much like Love Disc as Palafin looks like Fenizen. So I took some creative liberties on this just to make it make sense and wanted to go with this villainous type of feel. Also taking some inspiration from the character Star Sapphire as opposed to Green Lantern in Green Lantern comics. Star Sapphire is both Green Lantern's love interest in her everyday modern form, but takes on this villainous type of feel when this power consumes her. I thought that's a really cool dynamic to have for this Pokemon, and I also get to make it pink, because Star Sapphire is pink. Look it up, it's weird. I ended up going with that and using this more greenish type of water, again to get that villainous type of feel, and man, do I love this combination of Seafoam and pink. It just feels so energetic, and yet also so dark. And just kind of outlining that with that blackish, grayish type color to outline the broken heart symbol on this Pokemon's chest. It just gives it such an oomph, gives it such power in the color that we're using here. I don't know, I'm sure you'll let me know in the comments. And while you're there, let me know which of these Pokemon was your favorite. Would you love to see any of these in game, even if it meant losing the other form that they'd be replacing? Except for Love Disc, obviously, because Love Disc never got an evolution, even though Alomomola does exist. Whatever, we'll get back to it. I'll again, stepping off of my soapbox, I wanted to make a design that very much looked like Palafin. So the idea of this looking very much like that character and saying, well, it looks like it's just a different colored Palafin, very much the point, very much the idea that we were going for on this. And getting to play around with the colors of the shading alongside the watery aspect was fun and challenging. I wanted this to feel like water. But when studying Palafin and how they handle that type of texture, I found there's not a ton of difference that they do in regards to the color of water and the color of flesh. So it was a learning experience for me, and doing the drawing in that style and trying to look at that as the reference point, I'm hoping that I was able to capture something that works in a couple different instances here and really plays up that evil counterpart vibe without being too on the nose as just evil for the sake of evil. And so we have our first Pokemon in this video that I actually get to name. So this is Lavillain. Lavillain's name is a combination of Love Disc and Villain. Also a play on this sad and depressing story that we came up with on these two Pokemon who were madly in love, but were torn apart by the sense of duty that Palafin has towards its region and towards its Pokemon counterparts. I also got to play with the shiny a little bit, really looking at how they handle the shiny for Palafin as well, taking some of those ideas, flipping them on their head, and bringing others in the same way that they're utilized there. Again, just to make this symbol on the chest stand out so much more. This is the broken-hearted Pokemon, and I wanted that to feel like the emphasis and the center point to the entire design. So, who were your favorites this video? I know there are a lot of other Pokemon with interesting gimmicks and abilities that we could throw in here, but honestly, a Porygon for every Rotom type felt a little bit cursed. If you want the downloadable high-res images of these Pokemon and others from previous videos, consider checking out the Patreon. You can also buy designs seen in videos like this over at our Ko-fi. Both links are down in the description. YouTube members actually get to see these videos the moment that they're uploaded, as well as other perks during our Wednesday live streams for just $3. And of course, where would we be without our Discord community? Fun fact, our community is actually the first to time travel, putting a stop to the evil regime of Dolph Flanagan March. No idea who that is? You're welcome. But all that said, it sounds like you know where to find me, and I'll catch you in the next one. But before we go, I want to give a shout out to all of the supporters who help make videos like this possible. But a big McThankies from McSpankies to some of our higher tier supporters, those being Justin Grenier, Siren Sprague, Daniel, Kaylin Cat, Soren Frost, Styx TV, Dan Bush, Tony F, Ko-fi supporter, and over on our YouTube membership, some of our newest members to join our little club, or whatever you want to call it, Buddha Penguin, Tuck, Umbra Equitas, Ash the Green Dragon, Aaron Best, Beat Beat, Brang Adam, Frostbite, Anastasia Maria, Justin Grenier, Tobias Does Things, King Totodile, Mac Art, Sigil Sealed, Kalen Cat, Crimbo McSwizzle, and a huge thanks to Tinte for being a member of our YouTube. Thank you guys so much for everything you've done, and thank you so much for allowing me to create these videos. And all that said, bye.